good?
Mm-hmm.
Hello to anybody watching. This is just so that you can catch up on this lesson. So we're talking about our patterns. Now this is the commercial pattern for the hoodie that we're making. It makes the basic hoodie that I've shown you a picture of already. It has the raglan sleeve, it has a little patch pocket on the front, it has cuffs, a hemband, and a double layer hood. So these are what we get when we open up a pattern. Now these have been photocopied and then laminated to sort of keep them strong and last for a long time. Normally it's a really light, flimsy paper that you get in a commercial pattern. But what we always do, even if we use the light, flimsy paper, it's a really good idea to trace off your pattern pieces on the size that you want. So I'm going to show you how we have different sizes. Now some patterns might come with 6 different sizes in it. This one just comes with 3, a small, medium, and a large, and we'll use our measurements to determine which one you fit in. Most of you will be between the small to the medium, unless you're even if you're wanting to be really oversized, I would suggest that you still stick to the smaller and medium, and we make it oversized in the areas that you want it to be big. Because as soon as you go bigger, for example, this piece is the sleeve. As soon as you get the really big one, what that's actually doing is creating a bigger opening around your neck and creating a bigger opening around your underarm. And so you don't actually want those bits to be big. Sometimes you just want more bulk up here, or longer sleeves, or bigger around here. You don't necessarily want something that looks like you just put on your dad's hoodie. So that's one thing that we'll take into consideration. So the different size lines you can see, if you want to go quite close on the camera, have a look at any pattern in front of you, and you can see that there's a small, a medium, and then it's cut at the large around there. This one's actually, when it got photocopied, the paper folded over a little bit, but we did our best to sort of cut where the large shape should be. So you only trace off the one that you need. We normally trace them against the window because that's a lot easier to see. So we're going to look at the different, so that's the sizing lines. I'm going to look at the different other pieces of information because there's information all over these. So the first one I'll point out is there are numbers on them. The numbers relate to just helping you keep yourself organized. The pattern instructions will sort of tell you if you're doing hood D, you need pieces, blah, 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 and it just puts the number with it. But the main thing you want to look at is the title of the piece. So this piece is called Hood D. D is because there were 4 options on the hoodie pack. A and B I don't think had a hood. C had a hood, but it has a slightly different cut. It's sort of cut a little bit more femininely, like princess seams along here. Whereas D is like that more standard hoodie. And so that's the one we've been using. So all of the pieces we use should have D in it, but they'll have a different title. So for example, that says Hood D. Can we find what these ones say? What are some of these ones? Call out.
Front D.
Front D. What's this one?
Pocket D.
Pocket D. We've got here this one, Sleeve D. So that tells you what the piece is. So on yours, you don't need to write D because all of them will have D, but you definitely need to write on your piece the title of or the name of this piece. I also like you to write your own name on every single pattern piece because they all look very similar. They are often, especially little pieces, will get lost around the room. And if I pick them up and there's no name on them, I normally will just have to throw them in the bin. Sometimes I'm kind and I put them in the cupboard and let you sort it out later, but normally in the end I just have to put it in the bin, it gets lost and you have to retrace another piece. So make sure you put your name on it, the name of the piece, so sleeve, hood, pocket, front, back, things like that. The next thing we're going to look at is this bit of information here. So there's different information that says cut. So have a look on a few pieces and see what you can see. This one I definitely want to point out. What can we see under cut? What does it say?
Cut 2.
Cut
I
2?
think I saw 3 as well.
Really? Cut 3? I don't think there'll be a cut 3. What else can we see? Have a look at them. Do any of them say something different to cut 2? Yeah, so contrast, that is telling us to cut two of usually maybe a different, assuming you want to have a different fabric for that. So the hood is a good example of that. It says fabric cut 2, contrast cut 2. So in total you're needing to cut 4. So if your underlayer of your hood is going to be the same fabric and the same color as your top layer of your hood, you're just cutting 4 of the same fabric. If you're having, say, you've got black on top and white on the inside, then you're going to be cutting 2 of the black and 2 of the white. All right, so there's another one I want to point out. Let's have a look at it we can look at it on either the back or the hemband. Can anyone see the difference in the cutting instructions on those ones? What do they say?
Cut 1 and fold.
Cut 1 on fold. So what do you think that means? Think about it. It's saying cut 1 on fold.
Well, like fold it and then you cut it so then it's kind of like opens up.
Yeah, exactly. So this is the back. So obviously this is my front, but I'm holding it up to myself here. So this is only half of the back. We cut it to be symmetrical and to not waste as much paper and as much space. But generally when we cut out our fabrics, we always fold our fabric first. Some pieces we might fold our fabric, but then just have the pieces floating around in the middle of that fabric. So we're automatically cutting 2. So whenever, if you think of that one saying cut 2, this one saying cut 2, that's just floating in the middle of your fabric. Obviously preserving fabric, we're squishing them up close together. And once you cut around it, you are automatically cutting 2 because your fabric is folded. If it says cut 1 on fold, it's meaning, let's just pretend that I have a big piece of fabric here and I folded my fabric so the folded edge is along here. It means I need to place this piece along the fold, and there's a little indication. Now they've done it really small. I'll zoom in on the camera for it. That one right there, and you guys can have a look at it as well. They've made it really small on these pieces. It says center back on fold. Sometimes, so it's more this little diagram you want where it's a little box pointing to the side. That's telling you that that's the line, that this is the line here that needs to be on the fold. When I draft my own patterns, I often make that one bigger. I like to make it really clear and obvious that's my fold. If I don't put this on the fold, and I've accidentally put it in the middle and cut all the way around it, I'm then going to have 2 back pieces instead of 1 back piece. I'm going to have to sew together. Also, there's no seam allowance in here because it's expecting that it's going to get cut on the fold. So it's going to, when I have to sew it together and add a seam in, it's actually going to take away and shrink in my back of my hoodie. So it's really important that we do cut it on the fold if it says to. There's one exception to this, which is the front. Now the front, it says cut 2 and there's no fold indication. However, a lot of us prefer, or a lot of students prefer not to do the zip. And I'm very happy for you not to do the zip. Actually, it's the same as with the pocket piece as well. They go together. If you are not doing the zip, we actually need to take away this seam allowance. So these patterns have been drafted with seam allowance already in them, which means they're already a little bit bigger than you need to fit you perfectly, because it's assuming that you're doing 1.5 centimeter seam allowances all the way around. As soon as we are taking away that seam, when we're taking away the need for this seam allowance by putting it on the fold, we're actually going to need to cut a strip off this, a 1.5 centimeter strip off that. Same thing with the pocket, because the pocket is currently assuming that you're cutting 2 and you've got a zip going down. So it's got this extra little allowance in it to be folding over into your seam. But if we're not having a seam, we need to cut off that 1.5 centimeter strip, put it on the fold, and then that will double out for us as our pocket piece. So those 2 are a little bit different. You might need to say cut 1 on fold unless you're putting in a zip. All right, let's have a look at a couple of the other pieces of information. Don't worry too much about if it's got the brand name on it and things. That's not too important. This little line here, you should see that on every single one. I think actually the hemband is the one exception. Does anyone know what that is? It's a line going all the way down. It does actually say it on it. Have a little look. What's it called?
The direction of the grain.
Yeah. So it's called the grain line. So you should always have a grain line on every single thing that you're drafting, every pattern. That is telling you where to place the pattern piece in relation to the grain of your fabric. Now I should have got some fabric out to demonstrate this, some fleece out. I'll just grab a piece of cotton. So cotton has a very, very obvious grain because you can see the threads running down it. Your fabric has a grain as well. Your fabric will have stretch on the cross grain and no stretch or very little stretch along the grain. So we're going to be folding it over along the grain, so the grain's down this way, and placing our pattern pieces, assuming the fabric is big enough for them, along with the grain line direction on them. So that's really important to follow. That one becomes really significant on the cuff. I mean, it's important everywhere, but the cuff is the place people sometimes go wrong because they're trying to play Tetris and fit all their pieces in really nicely on their big piece of folded over fabric, and they just go, oh yeah, oh this piece fits in really nicely here, and their grain's going down that way, and they've put the piece with the grain going that way. That then means that you're not going to have the right amount of stretch in your cuff, and whenever people have done that, we've had to recut the cuff again because their cuff was just too tight, wouldn't stretch onto the sleeve. So that one's really important to remember, and I normally come around and check. Two more things I want to point out. Three. I'll quickly point out. Two of them do have a fold line. You can draw that in, but it's not as essential because the fold line is actually right in the middle. It's just saying when you make it, when you're actually coming to sew it, you're going to be folding it in half. But it's right in the middle. I don't see it as that urgent to do. All right, next one I want to point out are these little triangles along the side. You can see that wherever you've got size lines, you'll have three. One for the small line, one for the medium line, one for the large line. Does anyone know what they're called? Anyone come across those before in any sewing things? No, they're called notches. So notches are used to help you later on line up your fabric with a different, or line up this pattern piece in fabric with a different piece of the fabric of the pattern. So for example, sleeve has some notches right here that will connect to, that will be the back side of the sleeve, so this is the back, that will line up and connect to these notches once we start sewing it. Now obviously you're going, hang on, that curves around that way, that curves that way. Yes, but in fabric, we're going to be putting them together like that. So these notches will actually line up. So what we do with the notches, we draw them onto our pattern, and when we actually come around and cut our fabric out, we put a little just snip into wherever the notch is. And that will then help us line up those pieces of fabric later on. So it's really important that you do include your notches, only though on the size line that you're doing. So if you're doing small, you don't need to trace in the medium and the large notch. Last one is this one up here. We only have this on the sleeve piece, but they've done a very complicated version of it. This is called a dart. So you'll often find darts on bodices, dresses, skirts, where we need to shape in around some kind of curve. Because the hoodie is sitting a bit more baggy, they don't really have darts around the rest. Often we'll find something called bust darts. Actually, I don't think you have them on your dresses, but you see a lot of, where is my mini mannequin? Oh no, she doesn't have her corset on right now. I'll just do it on myself. So a bust dart kind of pinches in like this. It's where we pinch in some fabric and we stitch it down from the inside, and it curves the fabric in. So we've got one here on the top of the sleeve, and that, because it's a raglan sleeve that comes to here, we need a curve around the shoulder. So that's what this one is. Now it gets really complicated because there's so many lines going everywhere, but what it's asking you to do is, for example, we'll use the large as the example, you're tracing this line here as your cutting line, as well as this little triangle, and then there's a big triangle with the large next to it that you need to also trace really carefully. Now, when we cut that out in fabric, we are cutting this little one, we're not cutting the big one. The big one is showing where it wants you to fold. The little one is kind of weird because in a lot of patterns you wouldn't put a little cut in. I think they've done it knowing that fleece, most people are going to be making this out of fleece, and fleece doesn't really fray. But generally a dart wouldn't have a cut going into the back of it. It would just be solid fabric that's getting taken in. But this pattern is asking us to do a little cut there. So I have had a lot of people who accidentally cut the big triangle out, but please make sure you trace the little triangle for your size and the big triangle for your size, and only cut out the little one. So I think that's everything we need. I'm going to put up on the board the list of all the pieces you'll need. So you'll all be needing a front and a back, a sleeve and a hood, a cuff and a hemband and a pocket. So I'll put all those up. Now, if you are doing if you are wanting to do the zip, you'll also need piece 17, which is called the front facing hoodie. That goes on the inside behind the zip. So that's only doing it if you're putting a zip in for 17. So what we'll do is you'll start tracing all these. I'll get out the big pieces of paper. So trace all of them off. A lot of people like to stick them up on the windows to help let the light shine through to trace them. Make sure you include your name, the name of the piece, so sleeve, front, back, for example. The cutting instructions, cut 1 on fold, cut 2, cut 4. Now for the hood, you can decide for yourself, are you doing cut 2 of fabric and cut 2 of contrast, or are you doing cut 4 of fabric? You can decide that for yourself. So we'll get them all traced off, but for now we're not going to cut around them, because once we've traced them off, we'll talk about how we can alter them. So you might want to leave a bit of, if you're wanting to make it oversized, for example, leave a bit of extra paper all around your drawn on pattern piece, just, not ridiculous amount, like a good 5 centimeters or so all the way around it. And that means if we're coming and altering it, we've got that space to play with on your fabric. So we'll start by tracing them off, but we've also got the priorities of making sure your fabric order is in, and you've done your measurements as well. So I think we'll stop the recording there.